Hello and welcome to another edition of Meet the Manager. Here we interview a fancy football manager with a great track record of success. We will find out their strategies for getting a top finish by looking at their career so far, as well as their current campaign and specifically the game week coming up, which gives a good snapshot really of how their decision making is going. My name is Joe and today I'm joined by Josh Landon. Josh, welcome. How are you?
I am doing well, thank you. And I think I'm very prepared to talk about Game Week 5 because I just did 90 minutes on Game Week 5 last night. So
Oh right,
very,
well,
very, very, very prepped. Yeah.
so game week five's on your mind. Well, let's hope the rest of your career is on your mind as well. So what we're trying to find out a bit about the way you think, and hopefully give some good advice to people as well. So we'll start by looking at your fancy Premier League career to date. This is your ninth year playing FPL. Over your career, you have three top 5k finishes. With 1,224 last season, your highest as well. So these aren't something that's happened a long time ago. These are very current. But along the way, you've had some less than enviable finishes outside the top 100k on three occasions. Your podcast, Always Cheating, which you host with Brandon. Many of our readers and viewers will know that well. It has a strong focus, I think, anyway, when I listen to it. It has a strong focus on the eye test. And it's less bogged down by stats. It's more looking about how you feel about a particular player. So first of all, tell us about that. How important is it you watch a match, and what do you watch out for when you watch a match?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it is both, certainly. And in fact, I have a fantasy football scout membership so that I can track the stats as well. I mean, I think part of it is just I think a podcast sounds better if you're talking a little bit about the eye test as opposed
Yeah.
to getting into the weeds with data. But I do think it's really important. I mean, I think one example that stands out. I mean, so last season you just mentioned 1224, which actually it's funny because that still stings a little bit because I was
So
I was
close.
in the top 1000 the last, I think, 10 weeks of the
Yeah.
season, and then just slipped out the final game week. And I'll still kick myself. I made an 11th hour switch from Mane captain to Aguero captain. I think that made the difference. So stings a little
Oh.
still. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I think last season I did, I really focused on the eye test a lot more. And I don't know, I mean, partially because I feel like the eye test is kind of a way to um, break through all of the noise a
Yeah.
little bit. I think you, like me, really, I've got a Slack that I'm on. I've got Twitter. We've got this weekly podcast that we do. I mean, I'm just ingesting a lot of FPL information. And I think sometimes if I don't trust myself, or I end up making moves that I don't really trust myself because
Yeah.
it's sort of what everyone's talking about, and I sort of convince myself that X player is the best captain or X move is the best transfer or whatever. And so last season, one example of the eye test really coming good for me was there was a match, and I actually can't remember who they were playing. It was maybe like around game week 10, and Mohamed Salah came on as a substitute, and maybe played like 35 minutes or something like that. Maybe it was like away to
I think
Southampton.
that was a Burnley game.
Was
My
it a
memory
Burnley
says
game?
was. Yeah, he did come on as a sub against Burnley. So yeah, what did Salah do that made you think,
Well,
he's quite good?
I think he only picked up an assist or something in that game, but he was just absolutely electric, And so if you hadn't, he was so active and so eager to score, and it just felt like he had been like a little refreshed, like that little benching kind of made a difference. And I feel like if I had not seen him play, if I had not watched those 30 minutes of match, and I think it was a midweek game too, and so very easy to have missed it. I would have just seen Salah on a sub. Salah picks up 4-point return, right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have really thought about what he was seeing there. And so that was actually a game week when a lot of people were considering dropping Salah. As it turns out, he went away to Bournemouth the next week and scored a hat trick, and I captained him. And it was something like a 200,000 spot jump or something like that. Or I can't remember what it was, but it was basically like my whole season was kind of made on that one move. And I don't think if I had not been watching that match, I'm not sure I would have made that move. So, I think I try to be rational about it too. I mean, it's not like I see, I'm not going to watch some match where Oriol Romeu scores a goal, and suddenly think Oriol Romeu is passing the eye test. He looks electric, So I think it's kind of like, I still have a range of players. It's kind of like that poker thing where it's like you put people on a range of. I feel like I still have like a range of players that I'm considering.
Yeah.
But so I don't think I feel like I try to be maverick within a box, if that's
Well,
possible. If
I
that isn't
think
the
it's an interesting point you raised there, because this season, I think you may think the same as well. Is I think there's more players that we need the eye test for. These are players coming up from promoted teams that are
Mhm.
looking quite good as FPL assets, and they're doing well in the stats as well. New players from other teams. So Allaire at West Ham, for example, completely new to me.
Right.
I think I needed to see him in highlights to see what sort of
Yeah.
player was. Pookie as well.
Yeah.
Cantwell and Norwich as well. Great underlying
Yep.
stats. Never heard of him
Todd.
before a few weeks ago. What I mean, are you feeling that as well this season, where there's just more players that need the eye test?
Yeah, and I think it's going to keep happening, right? Because there's just so much money in the Premier League now that, I mean, Sebastian Allaire is a player that could be starting for Chelsea right now. I mean, as they're starting. Well, I mean, okay, Abraham is now
Yeah.
looking really good, but as of a couple of weeks ago, Allaire looked like the kind of player that a top six club was getting. And those players are now filtering down, sort of like one tier, I guess. Outside of the top six, anyway. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, yeah, Timu Puki is kind of. He's a unique one, because it's not like he's some 21-year-old who, is destined to move on to Manchester United at some point. He's like 29, journeyman. But then if you watch him play, and I mean, for me, I guess this is another eye test thing, because watching that game week 1 match away to Liverpool, I was like, this guy's amazing. Like he's so physical. He looks like he has the body for the Premier League, and this team looks super attacking. It wasn't just that he scored the goal; it was just all of the activity that was happening in Liverpool's box in a match you wouldn't have expected. That you would have thought they would have come out a little timid, maybe, or a little nervous or something, and it didn't feel that way. And so, as soon as I saw that, I immediately dropped Delafeu for Pookie before game week 2. And again, I think it was really eye test based. I mean, I like to, I mean, you can back it up with the data too. I actually used your goals imminent table all the time as a not to give you a swelled head or anything, but but I do find it, but I'll pop onto and look at the Opta data and and make sure that what I just saw is backed up a little bit. But often I'm just confirming a feeling that I already have about a player.
Yeah, no, that's good. I've just you brought up the goals imminent table, so I've actually added on expected data to that as well. Lots and lots of fantasy managers are telling me on Twitter I should be using that more, and I have started to integrate that more in the FPL content that I'm putting out there as well for Fantasy Football Scout. What's your attitude to that? I mean, we talked about the eye test. We talked about that you do use a bit of data. You use that to back up what you're seeing as well. What do you think about expected stats as well? Is it just too much maths for you, or are you okay with it?
It kind of is. I feel like I don't trust myself to interpret the data correctly. It feels like there's so much. I mean, like, I feel the same way about like points per million, which is like another big thing that's been sort of popping up. And I'm like, if you can use it correctly, great, but I feel like I would just use it to verify my own opinions. I mean, I feel like this is the way XG typically goes in fantasy right now. Not always, of course, but like often people are like, well, yeah, it didn't come off, but Sterling's XG was 0.72. I mean, it was just terrible luck that he didn't do something in that match. I mean, I don't feel like it's informing my decisions as much as it's helping make me feel better about when things don't go my way. I don't know. I mean, I guess, there are certain sites like StatsBomb that take XG data and sort of put it into a more palatable form, and sort of break it out for you. And I feel like if I'm just looking at pure XG data, I don't find it very useful because I don't trust. I don't know. I feel like, I mean, again, like it feels like if you're watching these matches, it'll sort of confirm what the XG data tells you. I mean, like if Sterling looks incredibly attacking and he's shooting a lot on goal, or in the box a lot, passing, creating a lot of chances in the box, like that's going to be clear on the screen as well. So I have respect for it, but I don't know that it really informs my managing too much.
Yeah, I always find as well with that expected data is that you talked about trust as well. So you trust what you're seeing with your own eyes, and you trust the way that you can accumulate that with various data and to come to your decisions as well. But with expected data and also big chances as well, that's another data point, is you've got to rely on someone else deciding that. And lots of people say it's subjective, but surely nothing's subjective in this world. There must be some objectivity to it. So we've got to decide. Just turning to some of your good and bad seasons, so the differences there. What do you think overall you've done differently in order to get top 5k, and what have you done to not get there and to get somewhere around about 100,000?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think that I think part of it, and I hope this doesn't sound like I'm making an excuse, but I think that living in the U.S., if you're not having a good season, it's kind of like the Premier League doesn't have to exist for you. It's just not around to the same degree. And so, I think for, at least one of, I've been, I think one of the finishes outside the 100K is like 129. So it's not like, so far off, but, I think one of my particularly bad seasons, it's just like I got married. My daughter was born shortly thereafter. It was just kind of a busy time, so that's kind of the like real world answer. I think one of the other seasons, probably my worst season, was what I call the Yaya Toure, Aaron Ramsey season. And this is maybe like 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. This is when Yaya Toure scored 20 goals in a season, and Aaron Ramsey I think he started off at 5.5 million and had his kind of one good season in fantasy. And I didn't have any of them or either of them for like the entire season. And it was like this stubborn feeling that I was like, that it was not sustainable. I was like, Yaya Toure is a central midfielder. There's no way to keep scoring these goals. It's not going to happen. Aaron Ramsey's never done this before. And it was like, I just couldn't join the crowd. And it was like that stubbornness. And then, what happens is that if you don't join the crowd in the first 10 or 15 weeks, suddenly it's February and you're ranked 1.1 million, and you're like, well, what's the point in joining the crowd now? Because if I have them and they do well, it's not going to help me anyway, which is actually kind of a false way of thinking. But at that point, then you're it's all like Hail Mary shots. You're like, all right, let me just go for whomever. I mean, I'm just going to captain, Daniel Sturridge every game week and see what happens.
It's an interesting example you give there. Mark Southerns we had on this Meet the Manager series before. It's exactly the same example that he gave, and exactly the same stubbornness that he put down to. But he hasn't done that since. So he learned from that. Do you feel that you've learned? Have you been scarred by the Ramsey Toure season?
Yeah, I think I have. I think just this season, I think that I've already done that. I wild carded in game week 2. Into game week 3, and I had Harry Kane, and I sort of went with Kane over KDB. I was debating those two players. After 1 week of Kane and KDB, I thought, what, this is not working, and I burned 4 to drop Kane and bring in KDB. So I don't feel like I have any stubbornness anymore. I mean, at this point, I feel very mercenary. It's like you've got 1 week, you've got 2 weeks, and I'm a lot less. Even though I know patience is kind of, in many ways, important, I am probably less patient now than I ever have been as a manager. I'm sort of always looking to drop somebody.
There was another point you made recently on your podcast, which really chimed with me. I found myself really shaking my head in agreement with it. Was talking about the third striker. So lots of people have been talking about the death of the third striker, and you were talking about how much you like the third striker, because this is a kind of a player that you can keep for a while, and if form goes, you can just hop on to the next one. The bus will soon come along with a new one, and we're seeing that with the likes of Pukki, Allaire, and of course Barnes as well this season. And in the past we've seen it with all sorts of players as well. Is that a new thing as well, your love of the third striker, or is that or are you just kind of adapting to footballing trends? There's just more third strikers about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are just more goals in the Premier League now too. I think that last season a record was broken for the most goals scored in a Premier League campaign, right? Just the sort of total goals in a season. And I wouldn't be shocked if it happened again this year. I mean, there's just so much talent, So, yeah, I think that having a lot of goal scorers is really valuable. I mean, I think it's also just the balance, the versatility. I didn't like my balance at the wildcard teams that I had going into game week 1. I didn't, or I should say that they're not really wildcard teams. Whatever the team I was building going into game week 1, I just didn't feel like allowed me a lot of flexibility if I wanted to make a move. And so that Pookie move I made in game week 2, I was able to make because I had Delafeu and I guess it was Delafeu, Callum Wilson, and one other player. Diego Jota. So I had those 3, and so it was very easy for me just to drop one and bring in Pookie, and drop Delafeu. But if you only had 2 up front, it seems very impatient, I think, to go right from Jota to Pookie, and it's sort of, I don't know, like for some reason that third striker, it feels like you don't have to be as emotionally attached or something. You can sort of just drop them for anybody, so I don't know if it's emotion or not, but that's sort of
I agree. I mean, when I saw some teams for game week 1 and they had, say, 1 striker at top, and they were all talking about how they were going to invest in 5 defenders and just have one, I just thought it was wrong, basically, because of the reason you just gave. You need that flexibility, I think, to hop on these types of bandwagons. You mentioned one of those trends there: more goals. The Premier League's getting richer each season. It can afford the people who score more goals as well. What other trends have you noticed, maybe this season or in recent years, that have affected the way you play Fantasy Premier League?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the fullback question is a big one, and one that's the sort of the fullback versus center back debate, which is I think really a really tricky one, and one that that I feel like I'm still working it out. I mean, I guess my feeling, I think my new philosophy or something, whatever the word is that you want fullbacks on the expensive teams and center backs on the cheap teams. And it feels like in the top 6, you just have incredibly attacking fullbacks right now. You have Trent Alexander-Arnold, Andrew Robertson, even a player like Emerson or Alonso, obviously Lucas Dean. So they can sort of get you sort of goal. You can sort of get points from them in 2 different ways. I think right now it almost feels like the clean sheet is a dying breed. It feels like you're not really getting them that often anymore. And so I don't know. I mean, I actually, I feel like I'm sort of rambling here, but if I maybe just in general, I just want to have fullbacks, unless you're talking about like Brighton or I guess maybe now a little bit, Sheffield United, where they have these sort of rampaging center backs. I just want players who can score for me in 2 ways. And I don't know. And so it feels like, I dropped Van Dijk, I dropped Trent for Van Dijk on my wild card, and I'm sort of already regretting it, because I don't know. It just feels like you just sort of double your options with attacking fullbacks. And so I guess that's a trend that I feel like, is that a trend? I feel like other people are talking about this, right?
I think it is a trend, but I think it's a peculiarity trend with Fantasy Premier League as well. So it's how we're adapting to what's happening in the real football world as fantasy managers. And the point you make there about the centre backs and fullbacks, so it does make sense. To have a centre-back for a cheaper side, for a promoted side, because when they keep a clean sheet, it's really likely that their centre-backs, the Tyrone Mingses of this world, will get that bonus point. So you could be looking at 9 points there. But for the top 6 side, they haven't got a chance, because there's going to be so many goals being scored. It's going to be a striker, a midfielder, or, as you said, the fullbacks as well. Another thing about that as well is people are thinking of, I think ever since Alonso, really, the likes of Marcus Alonso at Chelsea, Alexander-Arnold, we're starting to think of them really as midfielders. That's what they are, really. But they just happen to be classified. So, as you said, a clean sheet's almost like a bonus, really, as well.
It is. Yeah.
Also, about looking at your attitude to hits as well. So, a bit about formation there and about how trends are changing. But what do you do with hits? I take about 7 a year, and in the 1 year I took more, I did worse.
I think I took maybe 6 last season, maybe fewer actually. I'm not big on hits either. I realized I just took a hit going into game week 4. I think there are times when a hit is just very easy to justify, and it's just necessary. It just has to happen. I don't even necessarily think it has to be because of injuries. I think it's just, there are just times when there are times when you want it, there's times when you want to take a hit, and there's times when you need to take a hit. And I feel like I needed to take one going into game week 4 just to correct some problems in my team. I think in general, with good planning, you don't need to take a hit. And I mean, I can think of countless times when I stuck with a player one more week, to sort of avoid taking the hit, and that player rewarded me with, with an assist it's just like everything has to go so right for a hit to work out, and I don't know. I mean, even this game week, I got a goal, an assist. So I transferred in Allaire and KDB for Martial and Kane.
Yeah.
And I got 2 goals, an assist, and I think 4 bonus points from them. And it was still only a net 9, which is a lot, but it's not that much, I mean, one fewer goal and a couple less bonus points, and it's basically even, up from the 2. And so you really do have to absolutely nail that hit for it to come off. And if not, you're really better off just taking the one game week, just sort of taking your lumps and then making the transfer the next week without using a hit.
I always, when I take hits, I sort of, it's nice if you get an immediate return, but I tend to consider that hit as just sorting my team out. Really, I just feel uncomfortable.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know.
Yeah.
My pants and my socks are too small or something. I just feel really uncomfortable in it all. I just want it all changed quickly, and I want it to.
Yeah, I mean. I know exactly what you mean. I felt the same way going into game week 4. But it sounds like you and I mean, if you took 7 last year, it sounds like we're kind of in the same page about. I definitely don't go crazy with hits, and I really don't like to burn more than 4, and maybe 8 very occasionally. I feel like if I'm burning 8, it's like a disaster. Like I've got like multiple fires. I've got red carded players. I've got injuries. It's like the whole house is on fire if I'm burning 8. And burning 12, I think I've maybe burned 12 once my entire 9 years of playing. I mean, I just never do it.
I've only ever seen one player do that. I mean, there's a few people that are odd example, but I remember Villaronca, someone who we haven't had on Meet the Manager, but we should do. And I remember him using a -12 to great effect. It basically paid for a wild card, but the wild card was so effective after 1 week that he was, it was up about 20 points on the deal immediately.
Wow. Yeah, wow.
It's as you say, it's really rare though. You've had an exceptionally good use of a hit, and as you worked it out, it's 9 points, which is good, but it's not I'm going to win FPL type of good as well.
Right.
Let's turn to this season as well, because it's quite good, I think, to give people a snapshot of how you're thinking going into the next game week as well, and give some idea of the sorts of players and formation that you're looking at the moment. So I'm just going to quickly, for the benefits of those listening on the podcast, although we have the picture up on the video, I'll just run through it and then you can tell me what who's in and out coming up soon. So you've got Pope in goal, you've got Van Dijk, as you said there, you sort of regret that move. You've got Luka Dean, you've got Zinchenko, you've got Mane, Sterling, Fabello, Campbell, De Bruyne, Pukki and Allaire, and on the bench you've got Ryan, Wan-Bissaka, Lundstram and Wickham. So you've got quite a cheap bench there as well. No, I think we've got lucky with Lundstram, we've done well with our research, put it that way. So I've listed those out there. What's your thinking? Are most of the players settled? You're happy with them? And are there any going, and who do you want?
No, I don't think it's very settled at all. I feel like I honestly, I think, and anyone who's listened to the podcast knows, I think my wild card was kind of a disaster, to be totally honest. I regret dropping Trent. I regret moving from Salah to Mane. I have 1.7 million in the bank. I think the biggest thing for me was based on the first 2 game weeks of the season, I was convinced that Manchester United was in for a fantastic season. They had tons of affordable players who were going to deliver most game weeks, and I wanted to be in. I wanted to be in on that Manchester United bandwagon. It's a bandwagon that like immediately like collapsed on the side of the road or whatever whatever the metaphor is, But it just didn't work, And so, I think that AWB, I'm probably going to move out soon. Yeah. I may just move him for Trent and just go back to the Liverpool double up. I think that's something I consider. I have Ceballos right now as my, as one of my midfielders. I'm not convinced on him right now. I worry a little bit that he is going to be. It's not that I I think he will start most matches, but I worry about where he's going to play in
Yeah.
that team, and I'm not convinced. I worry that he's one of those great players, not great fantasy player
Do
type
you know what?
people,
It's good that you mention him there because he brings up another point, I think, that's happening with the fantasy Premier League managers, and that's our attitude to the old adage that always pick a nailed on player. And I started to think this more and more last season. It's costing me. Not. I'm thinking Raheem Sterling's not going to play every match, and of course he does. And because I'm
Right,
not thinking that, I'm missing out on all his points.
right.
I missed out earlier this season. Alexander Arnold. He's good. He's going to get rotated with Gomez. Well, he's not so far, and he might get the miss. Do you think is that why you've gone for players like Fabio and why you have your attitude to Alexander Arnold as well? Do you think that we as managers need to just have a good bench and not worry that they're not going to start?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that Yeah, I think that is true. I think that Pep has, and maybe Klopp to a lesser degree, have really changed the game,
Yeah,
and I mean, yeah, I mean, how many years do we have to go through this with this worry about I mean, Aguero's in that same category, right? Where I don't have him on my team right now, and it's
exactly.
partially because I'm like, well, I worry about him, rotate with Jesus. Champions League kicks off this week, so that's a big that's going to be a big factor as well. I mean, and again, I mean, it's there's always that seed of doubt, and even I was talking a minute ago about possibly moving AWB to Trent. I mean, the worry is back, right? Does Trent not play some of these weekend matches so that he's rested for the Champions League? Like what are the priorities this season? I mean, he's still only 21 years old. I mean, I don't think he's going to play 55 matches this year, so I don't know, but yeah, I think you're right. I think that those two teams are so good that it changes the game a little bit,
Yeah.
and it forces you. I mean, if Manchester United are going to win every game, 3-0, 4-0, 5-1, occasional 6-1, you just need to be covered with those players and not worry too much about rotation. And it's interesting. I wonder if I feel like this is very specific to game week 5, but I do think that David Silva is probably flying a little under the radar right now as a really interesting option, at 7.5 million. I mean,
Exactly.
he's sort of because he's also one of those rotatable players, and I'm like, well, I just don't know if I want him, but geez, I mean, back-to-back double-digit returns for a quote-unquote rotation-prone player. I mean, it's pretty tempting.
It is, and it's a good example. It's great that you brought him up because it's a great example of that, where fantasy managers are having to, if they want to get into these, get these good players,
Yep.
is have to just forget the whole nailed on theory and just think, well, it doesn't matter if they miss the odd game because they're
Yeah.
so good when they do actually turn up. I've had to alter the way I think about players like Alexander Arnold and Sterling. You have to move with the trend as well. At the moment, you've got a sort of a 3-5-2, 4-4-2 sort of hybrid there.
Yeah.
Can you see yourself sticking with that? Do you find is that flexible enough, or from what you were saying about the third striker, would you
Yeah.
prefer three up top and be flexible that way?
Yeah, I feel like I do want to. I think eventually I will go back to a 3-4-3. I think that just the way things have set up right now, the game has sort of thrown us a couple bones. Um, in Cantwell, you have a starting 4.5 million midfielder
Yeah.
on a really attacking team. In Lundstrom, you have a 4 point whatever he is now defender, playing out of position with some goal threat. I kind of want to play those players fairly often, and so because of that, I feel like I had the luxury of not needing a third forward right now, and because my bench can include those two players, and so it's a cheap bench, but it's full of players that I don't mind if they come on,
Yes.
and so I think, and so for right now, I'm able to have. I mean, it's kind of funny that I have Connor Wickham, who I kind of loathe, and I mean, had I known that Martial was going to get injured, I mean, geez, I would definitely have had Greenwood, but yeah, I think eventually I will go back to a 3-4-3. I mean, all three of my top 2,500 finishes have come with a very kind of meat and potatoes formation, a 3-4-3. But I'm not very tricky in general, and so, I mean, I'm pretty straightforward in the way that I set my team up. And so, yeah, but I just think this year it's a little easier to do the 3-5-2 with 4-4-2. Again, I mean, that Todd Cantwell is like a miracle. I mean, I don't know if it's going to last or not, but he is. I don't know. I mean, like you look ahead. I mean, yeah, they play Man City in Game Week 5, but then it's a really nice run of fixtures after that. And I mean, this team can score. I don't know if they're going to get relegated. They probably are, but I mean, they're going to lose a lot of games 4-3, and it's fun to have players, in a team like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity. Raheem Sterling, when he was first emerged with Liverpool, 4.5. Januzaj at Manchester United, 4.5.
Yeah,
and of course,
wow,
Campbell, 4.5.
Yeah.
And it is, as you used the phrase "throwing bones." FPL is throwing bones at us. I found that quite interesting. Is that something you've always done, or you do now? What I'm talking about is taking advantage of a very good opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like the name of the game. I think. I mean, if I have like one sort of like piece of advice to impart, I just think that it's about being as fast as possible when real value emerges, moving as quickly as possible to get in those players, right? So it was very clear to me going into Game Week 2 that Pukki was a player that I wanted to have in my team. So I just moved for him as quickly as possible, right? And so I was able to bank. Obviously, got lucky that he had a hat trick, that he did that well in Game Week 2. But that was just a 15-point edge that I was able to pick up. And I think the entire season, it's just that hunt for value. It's that hunt to get that player before everybody else does. And because everyone, there's like this sort of thing I've said in the podcast before, but it's like, a differential never lasts. A differential just becomes a highly owned template player in about 2 or 3 weeks. And so the whole trick is to identify those differentials and get on them before they become templates, because you get to bank all those points before everyone jumps on board. They're not always cheap players either. I mean, I think of Paul Pogba last season when Ole took over at Manchester United. He suddenly became an incredible differential, and the earlier you got on him, the better your season probably was, so I don't know.
Do you think that your earlier experience in your career with Ramsey and Toure that season, do you think that's affecting you now? That's that in action, because you didn't leap on those very cheap assets, those value assets then, and now you really are. You're really going for it.
Yeah, I think it did. I think about that all the time. I mean, Odion Ighalo is another player who stands out to me. Remember him on Watford?
Yeah.
He had that amazing start, and I didn't get him. He scored in 12 matches in a row or something like that. And so, all the time when I'm like last season with Raul Jimenez, it was like, do I go with him early or do I wait? And it's sort of like now I just try to go early, and just hope. It's like a leap of faith, and so I trust my instincts.
Yeah, no, it's also the cost of who you're getting rid of to do that, really. But right. I think that's a few points there really interesting about this season and about the changing nature, because you've been playing Fantasy Premier League for so many years, and you have those experiences, good and bad, over the years, and it's just interesting how psychologically they alter how we make decisions now as well.
For sure.
I often feel that my experience, which is similar, been playing FPL a long time, I often feel it's a curse for me, because I have so many memories of things that have gone wrong or right, and it's influencing my decisions, and it's a different time now. Are there any other examples you can think of off the top of your head where your experience has either helped or hindered you now?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, I think the example we talked about earlier, the Ighalo, Mahrez, I think it's the thing that I struggle with, and I know that this is something that that Mark Southerns does as well, and it's something that I really have to fight against, is because I've been doing this for so long. We talk about it, we talk about it every week on the podcast. There's this feeling that like I don't want to have everyone else's team. I don't want my team to look like everyone else's. I want it to be unique. I want it to be different. It's not just about being good for me. It's about being clever, and sort of being creative. And that is that can be a real problem for me. Yeah. And that does not typically help me, to have that mentality. And so I have to remind myself to be like 20% more boring than I want to be, and and I think that if I can do that, it almost always helps me, because, it's like, there was someone once said something like, it was like about fantasy. It was like, being different is fun, but doing well is really fun, and it's so true. I mean, it's like, who cares if your template, if you're 5,000 in the world, like it doesn't matter at that point, and then it's, your decisions are a lot different. You're just trying to make little tiny moves to keep moving up. And so I think that's the thing that I constantly work on is kind of checking myself. Like, am I making this move because I think it's the best move, or am I making this move because I don't want to look like all the other teams that I feel like I'm seeing on Twitter or whatever?
I think one way we can make peace with that is work out what the template is. And I remember at the beginning of the season, everyone's going 5 at the back. No, they're not. A few people who shout a lot on Twitter are going 5 at the back, and there's a template there. But then there's another template when you look at the ownership as well, and then you realise it's beginning of the season, so people are just trying out various things. Jimenez at Wolves was one of the highest owned players, and no one on Twitter is talking about getting Jimenez in, but perhaps they should be. As well. So it's different. I think that one way of reconciled, of trying to be different, is to working out, well, perhaps you are being different. You don't think you're being different because lots of people on Twitter are saying that, but you are actually being quite different as well.
Yeah.
Just before we go, is there anything else you wanted to add? Any other general advice that's helped you over the years?
Yeah, I think I've imparted most of it to the degree that I have it. I think that last point you said is interesting, because I do think that there are times when you want to check yourself and make sure that the range of players that you're considering is wide enough. And just as you were talking, and one player that I was thinking about that no one seems to be talking about is Roberto Firmino. Another player who's sort of, he's 9.5 million. He looks on it this year. He just looks really up for it. He's got 2 goals and 2 assists in the season. He's 2 million cheaper than Sadio Mane, and he looks every bit as valuable as someone like him. But I don't feel like I've heard anybody. Of course, I'm sure there are some people nodding their head right now, like, I have Firmino. What are you talking about? But in general, I feel like I'm not seeing a lot of people with him in their team, and it's not like he's some crazy wild differential. I mean, he's the starting forward for the first or second best team in the league. And so. I don't know. I think that sometimes you just have to widen your range of transfer options. I think that's something I try to.
I like that idea of you've come to a decision, then you've got to kind of make it more boring by 20%, and there's also thinking of players as well, and upping that by say 20%, and thinking of players and then extending the range just slightly. And as you say, Firmino is a great example of that. Everyone's talking about Salah, Mane, and they're forgetting the guy that's got. So far this season, 17 goal attempts, more than any other Liverpool player. And as you said, he's
outscoring Mane.
And he's also getting those actual tangible returns as well. Interesting. But Josh, thanks so much for joining me. I think
that was my pleasure.
You've given me a lot to think about there, and I hope we're giving a lot for the listeners and the viewers to think about there, about the changing nature as well of FPL, and how we've got to change our mindset sometimes to tap into that. But Josh, thanks so much for your time.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.